Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're just going to talk about Oregon's chain, the .325, where they've got a low profile version. I know they've got it in 43 thou gauge and 50 thou gauge. You could look it up, 80 TXL, and then it's got 051G, so there's all different numbers on the end for the different gauges. It also goes under another name of Speed Cut. So this is a new Wanfandangled .325 low profile chain. Just to give you a bit of a indication, especially for those new people and not too familiar, it's amazing that we've actually got 11 chain and bar combinations that you can put on different saws, and even the steel range. You know, you go back 15 years up to now, there's probably over 30 something models that have been released in a 15-year period. Enormous amount. So with all this 11 chain and bar combinations, and we'll just go over those. So first of all, you got 1/4 inch. Second, you got 1/4 inch Pico, which is much smaller, which is virtually low profile. Number 3, you got 3/8 low profile. Number 4, you got .325. And now the newbie, number 5, .325 in low profile in different gauges. Number 6, 3/8 standard. And number 7, 404. So that's 7 different sizes in 2 combinations, in the 1/4 inch and in your low profile, in your 3/8 in your low profile, and now in your .235 in your low profile. Then we've got different gauge sizes, which is the bar width or the drive link thickness. 43 thou, 50 thou, 58 thou, 63 thou, which if you go back to 43 thou, that's 1.1 mil. 50 thou is 1.3 mil, 58 is 1.5 mil, and 63 thou is 1.6 millimeters. Now file sizes, 1/4 inch is a 4 millimeter file, which is 532, and then you've got 1/4 inch Pico, which is a 3.2 millimeter file, which is a 1/8. Then you jump to 3/8 low profile, that's a 4 millimeter file, so that's 532. And in the .325, you've got 4.8 millimeter file, and then you've got the .325 in the low profile, which takes a 4 millimeter file. So the .325, taking the 4.8 millimeter file, is a 3/16 file. And then in the 3/8, you've got 5.2 millimeters, which is 13/64, or you can use 732, which is 5.5 millimeter. Depends on the manufacturer. Still recommend 5.2. Other manufacturers recommend 5.5. Then we've got 404 chain, which is 5.5 millimeters or 732. And as I said, the .325 now in the low profile is called 80 TXL, followed by the gauge number, and they also refer to it as Speed Cut. So the question was, what size file do I use in that? Well, you use a 4 millimeter file. Simple as that. That's also the recommendation from Oregon. Next question. A lot of the chains in the steel range come with 2 types of gauges that you can use to adjust the raker depth. And that's the flat little gauges here, or the progressive depth gauge here. Most of the professionals will be using the progressive depth gauge. The progressive depth gauge is specific, not one gauge fits all, whereas this particular one here suits 4 chain sizes. 1/4 inch, 3/8, .325 and 3/8 Pico or 3/8 point low profile. You'll see written on there .65. So what that is supposed to do is keep the raker depth at 0.65 of a millimeter. So in other words, if you look at the top of the tooth, and the top of the raker, you'll have a distance of 0.65 of a millimetre from brand new to the end of the life if you use this. Now, raker gauges should go a progressive raker gauge. Now, mind you, that was invented by Joseph Cox back in the early 50s, put a worldwide patent on it, as well as a Cox chipper chain. Joseph also had an adjustable raker gauge, an Oregon Type 1. Unfortunately, it's not for sale these days. I wish it was. And that was adjustable, so you could change the depth. Now, Ray Carlton maybe thought, I've got an idea here, and he invented the progressive depth gauge in the early 60s and called it Philo plate. And progressive depth gauge goes deeper than 0.65 millimetres. So it starts off at 0.65 millimetres, and by the time you get to the end of the life on a standard 3/8 chain, you'll be down to about 1.3 millimetres in depth. Now, I don't want to go into why. I've got other videos on the channel that explain the rocking motion and why you need to go deeper on a progressive depth gauge. So you can't buy a progressive depth gauge for 0.325 low profile, certainly not by Oregon. Oregon do not sell progressive depth gauges, period. Husqvarna do, and so does Stihl. So that's your best bet. Now, if you're a Stihl person and you want to get this chain, the 0.325 low profile, when the chain is about halfway worn down, go get yourself a Stihl 404 depth gauge. This is 0.8 of a millimetre in depth, so it's actually a little bit deeper, 0.15 of a millimetre deeper than the 0.65. So when your chain wears about halfway down, you could use the 0.8. Now, the other option is, if you're a little bit fussy, get yourself a feeler gauge. And when the chain's about halfway worn down, use about 0.8 of a millimetre. When the chain gets to the end of the life, you're looking at about 1.3 millimetres. So you can work that out for yourself. I actually made this gauge up. I've set it to 1 millimetre in depth. So that bolt, let's see whether you can see that really good. That protrudes 1 millimetre. So I can place that over the top and I can set and check. I use the feeler gauge to set the height on this. So that's what I use to set it with, or you could use a digital caliper. Sorry, you could use a caliper of some sort to set that. So that places on top and I can check to make sure that it's at the right height. So that's my adjustable one. It's not as good as the old-fashioned type one that Oregon made, but nonetheless it works. So the progressive depth gauge certainly works much better than the standard depth gauge, especially when the chain starts to wear about halfway down. The only other thing, if you're not sure about what file to use, because you're not even too sure of the chain, one little golden rule that you can remember, that any file on any chain, the file height, so let's just say you had a 5 millimetre file, 20% of that should stick above the tooth. So what that would mean, that 4 millimetres of that file should be filing the tooth away, the remainder not. Why not the remainder? Because that last remainder puts a edge about 60 degrees on there. So if the file sits on the bottom here, doesn't file away that, so that's the lowest point the file will grind, creates a C shape, and at this point here, this is about at a 60-degree angle. So roughly your file would be about this height, 20% higher, 20 to 25% they say. So 20% is a good to aim for, and you'll have that 60-degree angle there. So if you use a small file in here, you'll get too much of a C shape, which will be too much of a hook. And if you use too large a file, you won't even get a proper C shape. So just remember that if you're not too sure, use the file that you've got, and if it's not sticking 20% above the top of the highest part of the tooth, it's the wrong file. And if you're not too sure, ask a friend. And if that doesn't help you, go down to your local chainsaw dealer and they'll put you on the right track. Anyway, look, thanks for watching. I hope that's answered the questions about the new 0.325 low profile. At the moment, still don't have it. Oregon are the only one at the moment, but I expect that that might change in the near future. So I guess we'll have to keep our eye on that and see what happens. One of the reasons that you've got so many different combinations is you've got so many different chainsaws. The MS-170 goes from 30 cc's and it increases in some cases only 0.2 of a cc, 5 cc's, 2 cc's, all the way up to 122 cc's. There's all different models. You've got a lot of the 0.325 chains are on the Pro arborist type saws. So they have a narrow gauge. So with all those combinations I was talking about before, narrow gauge and low profile chains, you can find a combination that will be suitable for your saw. And if you're an arborist, you'll certainly be able to find that combination. Because the last thing you want is to lug a big heavy saw around. And this is where some of the steel battery saws are really starting to gain popularity because they've got a bit of grunt in them. You don't have to start them, and they work quite good. So keep your eye out for that in the future. I think you'll find out there'll be a lot of people using battery chainsaws, especially the homeowners. Maybe not so much the professionals, but the professionals in their cherry picker that are cutting limbs off, nothing wrong with a steel battery chainsaw. Excellent. And you'll get 40 minutes or something out of the large battery out of them, so that's more than enough just to cut off a few branches, because that's normally what they do. They cut off the main branches and start to drop the tree down in sections. Anyway, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to know anything or got a comment about that 0.325, all your comments are welcome. Bye for now.